A little bit about me. I grew up in Spokane. I haven't lived here since 1988. It's been a while since I've lived here. Came back here a couple years ago from the Seattle area. Been married 21 years to my wife Heidi. We have 3 kids, a couple in high school, one in junior high. And we have kind of lived all over the area of the United States because of my profession. I've always been in full-time ministry. So I did a couple years of college ministry down in Boulder, Colorado, where I met my wife. And then after that, we bounced over to Columbia, South Carolina to work with students at the University of South Carolina. You know, the Gamecocks, the Bulldogs played them and beat them. So I was actually glad, right? I was glad. But I was kind of sad for the Gamecocks. We did college ministry there. We started a college ministry. After 6.5 years, we went to St. Louis at Covenant Theological Seminary, where I received my Master's of Divinity. And after graduation, we went to the Seattle area, Redmond specifically, to plant a church from scratch. There's nobody in the church. My wife had to go to church. We were married. She had to go. And so we started that back in 2004. We did that for about a decade. And then eventually, God called us back to Spokane, or called me back to Spokane, to work with Youth for Christ as the executive director. We work with under-resourced kids, high-risk kids in some of the toughest parts of Spokane. So we're in West Central, we're in Hilliard. We are just opening up a new branch downtown by Lewis and Clark High School and one out by Meade High School. So we're really excited with all the expansion that's been happening and taking place. That's kind of who I am professionally, spiritually. Who am I? I'm 47 years old. I came to faith when I was about 5, so 40 years of trying to follow Christ. And man, I'm still trying to figure out what it means to follow him. I'm still trying to figure out grace. It's intriguing, it's confusing. Just when I think I figured it out, it disappears and I don't understand it. I'm frustrated that I still struggle with things and I'm broken and I haven't arrived yet spiritually. That's me, honestly, spiritually. And my question is, who are you? And we don't have time to pass the mic around, but I'm going to tell you who you are. You are, you're wonderful. You're all over the map when it comes to your spirituality. Some of you have been walking with the Lord for a really long time. Some of you not so long. Some of you maybe aren't walking with the Lord or haven't put your faith in him. Or maybe you came to Summit for the first time last week and you celebrated with all these people this event called the Resurrection. And you're thinking, what is that? And how am I supposed to live? And I think that's a question we all ask no matter where we find ourselves in our spiritual journey. What is the big deal with the resurrection and how does it impact my life? And the disciples wondered that too. It's easy to think, wow, the resurrection happened. I'm just going to move on with my life and it's going to be awesome. It's going to be great. I'm not going to make any mistakes and struggle. If that's you, that's a lot of pressure. You're putting way too much pressure on yourself. And thankfully, the disciples didn't have that kind of response because the disciples, like you and I, needed to learn the art of resurrection living. And that is my title for today. It's kind of a play on words, the art of resurrection living. Art can mean a couple things, right? It can be subject matter, like an oil painting, or it can be mastering something. I've mastered the art of fill in the blank. So I could have preached on the art of karate. It would have been really awesome. We could have looked at technique and breathing, and Grant and I would have broken boards and bricks, and it would have been sweet. We would have had our little belts on, and you would have said, that's the art of karate. Or I could show you paintings of karate. Should be weird, like Bruce Lee or Ralph Macchio from The Karate Kid. Awesome movie. Great movie. I could have done that. So you understand where I'm going, right? The art of resurrection living. I'm going to look at 3 paintings. 2 you may have seen. 1 I'm pretty sure you haven't seen. And I'm hoping to connect these pieces of artwork to our lives to help us really understand what it means to master the art of resurrection living. So let's look at our first text. It's John chapter 20, verses 1 through 8. Now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early while it was still dark and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. So she ran and she went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." So Peter went out with the other disciple, and they were going toward the tomb. Both of them were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. And stooping to look in, he saw the linen cloths lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen cloths lying there, and the face cloth, which had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen cloths, but folded up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went in, and he saw and believed. So we're going to look at our first piece of art that details this scene. It's done by Eugene Burnand, 1898. It's oil on cloth, a type of linen, and it just depicts the scene that we just read about. Mary's gone to the tomb, Jesus isn't there, she's in panic mode, she goes back to kind of the inner circle of Jesus, Peter and John, and says, hey, I don't know where Jesus is, and they instantly bolt. They start running towards the tomb, and here's a couple reasons why I like this painting. One, for its artistic beauty. Right? It's early morning. You can tell that the sun's low and it's angling up and hitting the bottom of those clouds. It's accurate. But I like it more for its emotive quality. And here's why. It lets me, it lets you, it lets all of humanity to enter into this race to the tomb to see if Jesus is really alive. Is the resurrection true? Is he indeed risen? And so as we look at this next painting, it gets kind of interesting because John's running. He's the one on the left. And that's a weird way to run, right? Have you ever, if you're going to run Bloomsday, don't, that's not going to get you up Doomsday Hill, right? That's a terrible form. But why is he running like that? I actually think he's a little anxious. I think he's pleading. He's almost prayer-like. Jesus, are you alive? Man, I hope you're alive. You said you're going to be alive. Please be alive. He's like a father or a mother who is pleading and running to find out if their daughter or their son is indeed safe. And so that's how John is running. He's anxious. He's anxious. John Irving writes this: I find Holy Week draining. No matter how many times I have lived through his crucifixion, my anxiety about his resurrection is undiminished. I'm terrified that this year it won't happen, that year it didn't. Anyone can be sentimental about the nativity. Any fool can feel like a Christian at Christmas, but Easter is the main event. If you don't believe in the resurrection, you are not a believer. I think John and Peter are feeling this tension. Honestly, I feel it. There's times where I'm like, did that really happen? Jesus, are you really alive? And so they're kind of running. They're a little terrified. But enough of John. I want to focus on Peter. For Peter, this is an uncomfortable race for him. I think running is uncomfortable. I don't like running. I don't like races. I grew up in a family where everybody ran track. My dad was a track coach. Some sort of AAU touring family. We went around all over the place, and we'd go up to Canada. And I remember this one time we were up in Canada, and I was running the 220, the 220-yard dash. They were dashes. And this guy, the starter, is announcing the next heat. And you don't want to miss your heat, right? Because you're instantly disqualified. And I was super nervous, and I didn't want to miss it, and my dad would have gotten really mad at me. This guy has this weird accent, and he says, "Take one Giddles, report to the starting line, take one Giddles." And I'm like, Giddle? Maybe I'm in the Giddle division, and I don't know it. We're up in Canada, maybe they're different categories. And so he says it again about 5 minutes later. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got to get to the starting line. Take one Giddles, report to the starting line. So I'm like, excuse me. I'm like third grade, and I pull on his clothes. And I'm like, hey, just wondering, am I a Giddle? See, you guys are quicker than I am. You already know what he was saying. He was saying, take one girls, report to the starting line. And so I went up and said, am I a girl? And he said, actually, no, you're a boy. So we got that cleared up. I made my race later when the guys ran. Uncomfortable. Peter, uncomfortable. This is a really uncomfortable race for him. And here's why. Because as he runs knowing he's a betrayer. He knows he has just betrayed Jesus. But like Peter, we toggle back and forth between this view of the ideal self and the real self. And here's the first point I want to make. The art of resurrection living is to know that Jesus embraces our real self and not just our ideal self. Now, what do I mean by that? What do I mean by the ideal self versus the real self? Here's an example for all you golfers. In my mind, I have an idea of what it means to be an ideal golfer. And there was a moment in my life where I was the ideal golfer. It was 2 years into the church plant. It was not going well. Not a ton of people. I raised all this money, moved my family out there, bought this house. What's going to happen? And I thought, I just need to be alone. I'm going to go golfing. 32 degrees out. That's cold for golf. It had been really cold in Redmond for about 2 weeks. So there I am. I'm going to play 9 holes all by myself, depressed. What's going on? Lord, is this going to work out? And I became the ideal golfer. I hit shots that I'd never hit in my life. I hit the ball so far, it helps that the fairway is absolutely frozen and rock solid like pavement. You hit a tee shot like 60 yards and it go bing, 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 like another 200 yards, right? Great shot. Par 3, I'm like, I hate this hole. I always hit it in the water. I always hit this ball into the water. Good news, the water's frozen. So I hit my shot. It's going right for the pond like it always does. Boom, skips across the frozen pond, bounces up 2 feet from the hole. Birdie, right? Ideal golfer. I shot I'm not kidding, 39 for the front 9. That's good. It's really good. That's the ideal Andre golfer. The real Andre golfer is a little different. The real Andre golfer has broken windows on $1 million homes on golf courses. The real Andre has thrown his clubs multiple times. The real Andre golfer has killed a duck. Shouldn't have been on the fairway. Should have moved. So sad. Well, we won't go into it. It's going to make me sad. That's the real golfer. All right? So here's Peter. He's not a golfer, but he's toggling back and forth between the ideal person and the real person. The last time we think of him, the last time we hear of him, he is saying this in his ideal vibrato. He says, Jesus, I'll go both to prison and death with you. I'll do it. Sign me up. Prison, death. That's his concept of the ideal self, but here's the real deal here. Jesus knows the real Peter. And this is what he says exactly after Peter says that ideal statement. He says, actually, Peter, the cock will not crow today until you've denied me 3 times that you ever knew me. Jesus says, hey, Peter, your real self, it's embarrassed of me. Your real self, it seeks safety. Your real self wants to look good in our community. Your real self is worried about your reputation. Peter, your real self is going to deny me 3 times. This is how the story goes. A servant girl, a little servant girl, she had no power, saw him seated there by the firelight. She looked closely at him and said, this man was with Jesus. And he said, woman, I don't know him. A little later, someone else saw him and said, you're one of them. And he said, man, I'm not one of them. About an hour later, another asserted, certainly this fellow was with him. He is a Galilean. Peter replied, I don't know what you're talking about. Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed, and the Lord turned and looked straight at him. Peter remembered the words the Lord had spoken to him. Before the rooster crows today, you're going to deny me 3 times. And he went outside, and he wept bitterly. Now, this would have been such a painful scene in the life of Peter. Any follower of Christ to publicly deny that you even know who Jesus is in his greatest need, at his greatest hour. The text says that just then, after the rooster crowed, Jesus looked intently and directly into the eyes of Peter. Now, the question that theologians and commentators have been trying to answer for years is, what did that look communicate to Peter? And some have said it was a look of disgust, disdain, frustration, hurt, anger, betrayal. Peter, how could you do that? I need to say that those are terrible. These are really smart people that have said that. Those are terrible explanations. And here's why. Jesus just told him that you're going to do this. Jesus was fully aware that this was about to happen. Nothing caught him off guard. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't sucker punched. He's It's like, you're going to do it. And he did it. But that doesn't help us clear up what that glance communicated to Peter. What did the look say? Years ago, I heard a pastor preach on this, and he said, I'm going to tell you what that look communicated. Right after Peter denied him. And it's a look that says this, hey, Peter, I'm going to see you in 3 days. I'll see you in 3 days. I'm coming back. I'm coming back for people who betray me and deny me and who don't want to associate with me and who are embarrassed. I'll see you in 3 days, Peter. And so, Peter runs. He runs with that thought in his mind. Is that the look and what it meant? Could it be true? You see how he's running? Is it true? I remember that look. How could I forget it? I went out and I wept bitterly. I felt terrible. But is it true? But it has to be true. Please be true. Please don't be dead. Because only a resurrected, living king could embrace the real me, the real betrayer. Please, Jesus, be real, be alive, be raised. Now, we all have this mental idea of our ideal self and our true self. And let's get away from the golf illustration because that's really not that important, right? Let's take it a little closer to our hearts because you have an ideal concept of what it means to be the ideal husband and the ideal father and brother and friend and wife and mother. Any mothers out there think, this is the ideal mom, the ideal kid? Man, that is a ton of pressure. The ideal employee. I want to encourage you to remember that Jesus embraces not the ideal you, the real you, and all of you. Here's the problem. You don't have enough grace in your own heart to embrace your own brokenness. You just don't. But Jesus does. He has a surplus of it. And he just pours it on you. And so I want you to embrace the fact that Jesus loves you deeply, the real you, and all of you. If you can't do that, you become very angry. And not only do you become very angry, you get really angry with people who don't live in the ideal world, which is everybody. But if you can receive that grace, first for you, believe it or not, you'll start to extend it to other people who let you down and aren't ideal, and you embrace the real friend and the real father and the real pastor and the real coworker. So that's our first painting. I want to shift gears a little bit to our second. And I think this painting is a little more compelling in terms of beauty and the use of lighting. It's painted by a great painter named Caravaggio, and he painted it in 1601, 1602. It took him a long time to paint it. It's really big, huge painting. This guy's a master of lighting, and it's entitled The Incredulity of St. Thomas, and it goes with the following text. Now, Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We've seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where his nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here, see my hands? Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." It's here where commentators and pastors typically start to just fire on Thomas. I mean, they just unload their ammunition. There's shell cases everywhere. They're like, blam, 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 I can't believe you would do that. Thomas, who gave you the right to ask to do that? What's wrong with you? Why do you doubt so much? What is your deal? Why can't you just believe like the other disciples? The answer is actually really easy. He wasn't with the other disciples when Jesus appeared to him. But now Jesus is in front of him. And I don't want to get into a debate whether or not he should have believed or not have believed. But what I want to look at today and focus on is something that I think is actually kind of odd about the resurrected body of Jesus. And it's this: he still has those scars. It kind of doesn't make sense. You see, when I think of Jesus, and perhaps when you think of Jesus, I'm going to guess that you don't visually see him with scars, with a big open wound in his side and nail prints in his hand and in his feet. But we have to. If we're going to learn the art of resurrection living, we need to remember those scars, and we need to embrace those scars. For 730,000 days since the resurrection, Jesus still bears those scars. It seems strange. Heaven is a place that is not supposed to have any defect, any pain, any suffering. The scriptures teach us that when Jesus returns, we will be raised like him, and he will give us new bodies that are perfect. No sin, no marks of sin. But he still has them. He still has the scars. So why do we need to remember them? Here's the first reason why: because Jesus remembers them. He remembers those scars. Anybody here have a tattoo? Yeah, some of you. Anybody been branded? Okay, I've been branded. Okay, fraternity days, long time ago. Long story. We can go for a walk later, and I'll tell you all about it. If you have a tattoo, or if you got branded, you thought long and hard about it before you did it, right? And you didn't put just anything on your arm or your leg. You thought long and hard before that needle with ink in it ever touched your skin, because you wanted it to symbolize something important and valuable. Well, friends, Jesus Christ still has his scars. And you know what? They are the jewels on his body. They're the trophies of his body. They are his tattoos, if you will, to remind him of something beautiful and valuable and important. And that is you. And so we remember the scars of Jesus because he remembers them, and then he thinks of you. And he embraces you with those scars. But we remember them also because we need to go back to those scars. We still need them. We still have to have them present to heal us and remind us of his love for us. Too often we think, as we go through this life as followers of Christ, that, okay, I get it. Jesus, you died on the cross. It was really painful. And you forgave my sin back then. And now I'm going to just hammer through life. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to just do it. I'm going to be that ideal follower of you. How's that working out? Pretty tough, isn't it? That's not how it works. Those scars are still there because we repeatedly go back and back and back. I read that passage earlier from Isaiah. I'm going to read it again. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him. And by his wounds we are healed. People give Thomas so much junk for being doubting Thomas. I think Thomas is a hero. Thomas is a hero of need. He's the patron saint of need. We're needy people. We can't forget that. That's part of living the resurrection life, that we're needy. This came home really true to me recently. Youth for Christ and some churches was doing some work out in a place called Meade Royale. It's past Hilliard, a little north off Market, and it's a trailer park. It's a tough place. Been out there a few times. Been out there a couple times at night. I'm telling you, I was scared, to be really honest. I was like, I'm going down. There's like nobody on the streets. I'm like, why is nobody on the street? Because it's dangerous. Cops don't want to go in there. There's gangbangers, drug dealers, meth, crack, labs, you name it. It's there. There's kids there that need to hear about Jesus. And so there was an outreach event with hot dogs, and you could get your hair cut, and you could get some clothing, and there are dudes rapping and, talking about Jesus, and people coming to faith, and church people all around. And it was interesting. I started getting annoyed with these church people. They kept coming up to me and inviting me to go to their church. I was like, what is going on? I'm like, I got jeans on, I got like a skateboard t-shirt and sunglasses. I don't know, I just was like, I'm just a dude here. I'd have my name tag and say executive director, Youth for Christ. And just inviting me, and I'm like, it dawned on me. I'm like, oh my goodness. They think I'm one of them. They think I'm a trailer park guy. And I tell you what, the Lord, so fast, before I could even say that last word, them, he's like, don't you ever forget you are. Andre, you are them. Your brokenness and your sin, it's just kind of like white collar sophisticated. It's just not out in your open. I can put my best foot forward. I can fool you. Man, you're them, Andre. Don't you ever forget how needy you are. So that's why I love Thomas. Because Jesus says, man, you need me. And I embrace you. And I'll let you put your hand in my side. Any doctors, physicians, nurses out here? Jesus says, hey, put your hand in my side. Anything weird about that picture? I mean, why shouldn't you put your hand in that side? What's the deal? I mean, look how dirty that hand is. I mean, infection's coming, right? Here's what's amazing about Jesus. He never thought that he'd catch anything from you. As broken and dirty as we are, he always thought you'd catch something from him. Grace, mercy, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, self-control. The list goes on and on. Can you put that hand, can you put your dirty hand in the side of Jesus? Jesus says, yeah, he's grabbing the hand. He's shoving it in there. He's like, Thomas, put your hand in here. Spurgeon says to put his finger into the print of the nails and thrust his hand into his side was much more than any disciple had a right to ask of the divine master. And yet see the condescension of Jesus. Rather than Thomas should suffer from unbelief, Christ will let him take great liberties. Our Lord does not always act towards us according to his own dignity, but according to our necessity. And if we are really so weak that nothing will do but thrusting a hand into his side, he will let us do it. He's grabbing his hand. Thomas, put your hand in here. Come back to these wounds. Come back to the scars. We all have hands that sometimes they look clean and sometimes they're not. Sometimes our hand gives money away and sometimes it hoards it. Put that hand into the side of Jesus. Sometimes we're patient and kind and sometimes we raise a fist and get angry. Put that hand in Jesus. Sometimes we reach for reputation and building a name for ourselves. Sometimes we have a racist hand if we're honest. We have a hand that grabs the mouse on the computer and clicks on the porn site and then to the next one. Man, put those hands into the side of Jesus. Be close to his side. Be under his arm of protection. Be near his heart. That's where that hand needs to be. Stop doubting that he loves you and accepts you. We have one last painting. I don't think you're going to know the painter very well. He's not very well known. This painting is entitled Again. It's a Northwest painter. I like this painting because this person painted the painting here during a time of exhaustion and doubt. And I like it not because it's worth much. It's not worth much. It's actually not great, but I like it. Because it was painted by a very broken person. A person who's trying to figure out, hey, what's life all about? And Jesus, do you embrace the real me? And the reason why I know so much about this pretty crummy painting is because I'm the painter. It's my first attempt. Does that laughing encourage me? I don't know. Oh, look at that, it's funny. But man, I was painting, I was having fun, and I'm like, I'm trying this, and I worked really hard for like 2 or 3 days. And my kids were saying it was good, and then it just kind of went sideways quickly, and that can happen. I'm like, oh my gosh, this looks awful. This doesn't look like Woodby Island, where we went crabbing and did all that fun stuff. And so I got mad and frustrated, and I loaded up my biggest brush with as much red oil as I could find. And I just put an X through it, put the brush down, and walked away. Just let it sit there. And my kids came back a couple hours later, and they're like, Dad, what'd you do? What? You wrecked your painting. That was awesome. That was an awesome painting. I'm like, quit lying. Lying is not good. It was bad. Like, no, seriously, Dad, it was good. And this is why I love this painting. It really is probably my favorite painting because of all the story behind it. I took out a rag and I just wiped it. I wiped the red X off, and the clouds fell off, and the waves were gone, and I started, and I tried again. And that is just really that's the message of the gospel. That's the art of resurrection living. Jesus says, hey, I see the brush strokes. I see the pain. I see the betrayal. I see it all. But I'm gonna wipe it clean, man. I'm gonna wipe it, and we're gonna do this again together. And he starts painting. He starts painting to that ideal person that, one day you'll be him. You'll be her, but not until Jesus returns. But in the meantime, hey, embrace the fact that Jesus loves you deeply, who you are right now, today. He invites you into that relationship. Let's do this again together. Would you stand for our closing song? I'm going to ask if you're comfortable to raise your hands. It's very traditional for centuries. Pastor would pronounce a blessing or a benediction on you. It's not a prayer. We don't have to put our heads down. It's actually for you to send you out into our community. So if you're comfortable raising your hands, please receive this blessing. May the Lord bless you. May he keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you. He's crazy in love with you. May he lift up your countenance and grant you peace. May you remember how loved you are. He's crazy in love with you. Believe it and live in it and live out of it. Go now and serve and love the Lord and your neighbors. Have a great week.